Police are looking for this boy, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch. He's the son of Mr. and Mrs. John Gosch of 1004 45th Street in West Des Moines. The boy was last seen this morning about 6 o'clock as he began his paper route in front of Valley United Methodist Church at 42nd and Ashworth.
On September 5th, 1982, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch woke up early to deliver newspapers in his West Des Moines, Iowa neighborhood. Other paperboys spotted him at around 6 a.m. with his wagon full of deliveries not far from his house. But Gosch never made it home. The only sign of him was his little red wagon.
I knew something had happened to our boy. I don't know why I felt that way. Mother's intuition.
A few witnesses said they'd seen him giving directions to a strange man in a blue car, but police initially assumed he'd simply run away. And this gave his kidnapper plenty of time to escape.
It's just gripping every single minute of the day, worrying about his safety, whether he's warm.
Even once the search for Gosch began in earnest, though, there were no real clues to follow.
I think everybody wants to know what happened.
It was just frustrating because there was never any solid information to go on.
So when another boy disappeared 2 years later under very eerily similar circumstances, a fellow Des Moines resident had the bright idea to print both the boys' photos on milk cartons at the local dairy. And this soon sparked the campaign to feature information about missing children on milk cartons across the country. In the 40-plus years since Gosch's disappearance, numerous people around the United States had reported sightings of him, with even his own mother saying that he showed up at her house one night back in March 1997 to let her know that he was alive. And we'll get to that a little bit later. However, despite all these claims, Johnny Gosch still remains missing to this day.
These people took Johnny. I thought, 48 hours, we'll know something. Well, we didn't.
Now let's take a look at exactly what happened. On September 5th, 1982, Johnny Gosch woke up before sunrise and left the house with his dog, Gretchen, to deliver newspapers in West Des Moines, Iowa. It's also been reported that his father usually went with him or sometimes went with him. However, he decided to stay at home on that fateful Sunday morning. At around 7:45 a.m., the Gosch household received a phone call from a disgruntled neighbor wondering why his newspaper hadn't been delivered yet. And this was odd because Gosch should have finished his route by then, and his dog had come home as well, but Gosch had not. It was then that John Gosch, Johnny Gosch's father, started searching for his son around the neighborhood.
Day one was shocked that this kind of atrocity could happen. It just doesn't seem like it could happen in your neighborhood 2 blocks from your house.
But all he found was his son's little red wagon with all the newspapers still intact. It was then that John and his wife Noreen alerted the local police. However, because there was no note or demand for ransom, police assumed that Johnny Gosch was a runaway, and the law stated that they could wait for 72 hours before declaring him missing and therefore starting a search.
You don't think it's a kidnapping though, do you?
I'm not ruling out anything, but I have nothing to indicate that it was a kidnapping.
Do you think you would have heard from the kidnappers by now if it was a kidnapping?
I would state that normally, yes.
Now imagine being a parent knowing that your child would not run away from home and being told by law enforcement that you have to wait for 72 hours, which is 3 days before they can conduct an official investigation and start searching for your child.
And they said, now, this is just a courtesy call. We are not going to enter the case because you have failed to prove your son's life is in danger.
And when police finally began looking for answers about Johnny Gosch's disappearance, a chilling timeline of events began to form. As mentioned, other paperboys who had been working with Gosch had seen him talking to a man in a blue Ford Fairmont at around 6 a.m. Noreen Gosch later detailed what she'd heard from witnesses about the incident. Apparently, a man stopped in his blue Ford Fairmont in the area where the boys were assembling their newspapers. He got out and asked Johnny Gosch for directions, got back in his car, and before he left, he flicked the dome light 3 times. And by doing this, Noreen believes that he was signaling to another man who then came out from between two houses and began following Gosch. However, the story does vary and nobody could recall many details about the man and his car, so police had very little clues to go on.
The residents say the incident has shaken up the entire area.
We watch our kids like hawks. They play together, always with adult supervision, never alone.
Frustrated with law enforcement's response, Gosch's parents began taking matters into their own hands.
To feel so helpless that I couldn't help my own son. I have never in my life been in a predicament such as this.
John and Noreen Gosch made television appearances and distributed over 10,000 posters printed with their son's picture. And 2 years later, when a 13-year-old boy named Eugene Martin vanished while delivering newspapers just 12 miles from where Johnny Gosch was last seen, Gosch's story spread even farther.
In the early morning hours of August 12, 1984, Eugene Martin disappeared while preparing to deliver newspapers on Des Moines' southwest side.
One of Martin's relatives worked for the local Anderson and Erickson dairy, and they asked the company if they could print photos of Martin, Gosch, as well as other children missing from the area onto their milk cartons. The dairy agreed, and the idea soon spread nationwide.
Not too long ago, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing or hearing about the two missing Des Moines newspaper boys. Their pictures were on milk cartons, billboards, posters, grocery sacks, even on the sides of truck convoys rolling cross-country.
The massive efforts by the Gosches ensured that news of the abduction spread far and wide, and not before long, people were calling the police to report sightings of the young boy. And in 1983, a woman from Tulsa, Oklahoma stated that a young boy ran up to her in public and said, "Lady, please help me, my name is Johnny Gosch." But before she could react, two men dragged the boy away. 2 years later, in July of 1985, a woman from Iowa received a $1 bill along with her change while paying at a grocery store. Written on the bill was a short note which said, "I am alive," with Johnny Gosch's signature written beneath it. And 3 separate handwriting analysts confirmed that it was genuine. But it wasn't only strangers who claimed to have seen Gosch. Because as mentioned before, Noreen stated that he showed up at her house one night 15 years after his disappearance. According to Noreen, she said that in March of 1997, she awoke to a knock on her door at 2:30 a.m.
I did see Johnny in March of 1997. He came here very late at night.
She then proceeded to open the door and she saw a strange man standing there with her then 27-year-old son. She claims that her son opened up his shirt to reveal a unique birthmark and then came in and spoke with her for over an hour.
He's angry, he's bitter, he's full grown.
According to her, Gosch told her not to inform the police as it would put both of their lives in danger. And he continued to say that he was kidnapped and sold into a child sex trafficking ring, and a strange package that appeared outside her door nearly a decade later seemed to confirm her beliefs. And although both police, as well as the elder John Gosch, who divorced his wife in 1993, doubted whether or not Johnny really visited her in 1997, a set of photographs which was sent to Noreen in 2006 made them wonder if she was telling the truth all along. That September, almost exactly 24 years after Gosch's disappearance, Noreen found an envelope on her doorstep that contained 3 photos of several boys who were all tied up, and one of them looked just like Johnny Gosch. Police were stunned and quickly looked at the source of the photos and came to the conclusion that it wasn't Gosch after all, because it was reported that these photos were previously investigated in Florida and it was found to be a group of friends just messing around. However, Noreen still finds that hard to believe, as she remains convinced that her son was forced into a pedophile ring partially due to the information that she's received over the years.
So if you take a child 10 to 12 years old out of their environment at home, no school, no friends, not even anything that they owned would they have with them. And you put them in that type of situation where they're threatened every day of their life. If you run, if you try to contact your family, we'll kill you, or we'll kill your mother, your brother, your sister, whatever you have. And some of the kids that have been in that situation have told me that's the threats they lived with every day. Well, after a while, you become pretty afraid of anything that moves. You wouldn't take a risk. And so I think that's the mindset with a lot of them.
In 1989, a man by the name of Paul Bonacci, who was in jail for sexually assaulting a child, told his attorney that he'd also been kidnapped into a sex ring and that he was forced to abduct Johnny Gosch in order to force him into sex work as well.
He said he was part of a child pornography ring that kidnapped Gosch from that suburban street.
Mike jumped out of the car, and all I remember was that Mike followed the kid in, and I just put this stuff over his face like I was told to.
I was at the prison. I met with him, visited with him. Law enforcement did not go and visit with him.
But the FBI said that his story wasn't credible. Although Noreen Gosch was often dismissed as a grieving mother driven to outlandish conclusions and stories after the disappearance of her son, her determination ensured that missing child cases would be handled with greater urgency. And in 1984, Iowa passed the Johnny Gosch Bill, which required police to investigate missing child cases immediately rather than waiting 72 hours. Even though Johnny Gosch has never been found, his legacy as being one of the first milk carton children, as well as the importance of the legislation that has been passed with regards to missing children, this may have saved countless others from suffering the same fate as he did.
Johnny's case was often called the watershed case because so much legislation was passed federally. We didn't just sit down and say, well, there's nothing we can do. We found something to do.
Let me know your thoughts about this case in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.